you are now live.
Thank you. This is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our work on fiscal year 2023 budget. And we have with us today Commissioner Kasich of the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation, and you have other staff with you, Commissioner. So I will have you introduce your staff, and then we will then talk about your budget. We know that you help generate money, so it's a good position to be in, and we'll go over the high points as well as, you know, some of the, it gives you a chance to update us in terms of what the department initiatives and sort of the year ahead. So do you want to do introductions, and then I will leave it up to you in terms of how you want to present your budget request.
That sounds excellent, Madam Chair. So I'll first introduce David Cameron, who's in our director in our business office. And Dave's been with us for longer than I've been commissioner. So he's been, in our department for some time and handling our budgets for probably 7, 8, 9 years, right, Dave? 10.
Okay.
And then someone that is new to this position, but not new to our department, and probably not new to those in the room, Emily Kasich, who's our director of policy. So Emily had served as our de facto director of policy about 5 years ago when I first became commissioner, and then she took another job within our department. And Jill Rickard, who has been our director of policy for the last 4 or 5 years, she was recruited to go to the private sector. So we are happy for Jill that she's in the private sector and doing something that is good for her, but we're also happy to have Emily be able to step in for Jill and be our point person on policy in the legislature and rulemaking. So those are the two DFR staff members I think are on the phone or on the Zoom with me today. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anybody. No.
Oh, well, Jill and you, of course, had the pleasure of doing Hazard Pay. And so I just want to say I have a lot of emails exchanged, but the response and helping deal with some things that we never anticipated was very helpful. So glad to have you here, and just want to thank you for your work you did on that front.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It was really an honor to do that work. It was impactful for so many people, as you know, in the legislature for creating that program. And Jill, and we had a team of about 20 people that sort of, whether full-time or part-time, helped on that, the department. And it was pretty intense for what, 5 weeks or so, 4 or 5 weeks. And our team, I just was proud of our team. They were just exceptional getting that done. So it was nice to see.
Yeah, made a difference for a lot of people. So thank you. So we have a document here. I'll leave it to you. We can read. So,
well, maybe what I'll do is, I'll talk about the first page, which is just the summary of the budget, and then I probably can just skip down to page 11 that just talks about some of the items that we've been encountering this past year, and that leads into the ups and downs, and then to our goals for the upcoming year. So that might be the best way of approaching this.
Okay, well, you're going to have to tell us which is page 11 because they're not numbered.
Oh, I see. All right, fair enough.
I mean, I could count to 11, but okay.
So
start with the first page, which is summary and highlights.
Yeah, exactly right. So page number 2 has the summary of the budget. You can see it's the budget request is $17.3 million. It's a 100% special funded department. So all of our revenues come to us through different means, but primarily through registrations, through filings, sometimes through enforcement actions and penalties, through some part of the captive insurance tax. But all of those revenues add up quite substantially, and the 17.3 million is what we hope to keep, and then the remainder is sent to the general fund. So through our direct app, which I think we have a note in here again, we anticipate our revenues pretty much being as high as they've ever been. We've seen an increase in the number of registrations, the number of licensures, the number of captive insurance companies. So the number of both individuals and businesses that are registered in Vermont to do financial services work. So we continue to expect our revenue to be greater than it ever has been previously. So which is really a nice thing. But as we usually always like to mention, just sort of at the high level, both in terms of our leadership and in terms of our employees, really the leadership team continues to be very stable at our department, really strong deputy commissioners, really strong directors throughout our department. We are fortunate to have an experienced leadership team, both in terms of their time with the department and in terms of their previous professional experience, whether that be in industry or in the law, whether it's an accountant. They bring really strong expertise, and that goes all the way through our staff. Our staff is really our strength. Ever since I became commissioner about 6 years ago, the thing that I was focused on was making sure we maintained that strength in our team at both the leadership level, but also all the way through the department, because it's hard to build that back up. It's easy to lose it, and I think we have an exceptional team and want to maintain that. So continue to have strong national recognition in the insurance and in the captive insurance space. I can talk a little bit more about that in detail, but there's really not too many real complicated items with our budget. We have no new position requests for fiscal year 23. We have no new funding requests for fiscal year 23. So the about 1.1 million, I believe it is, increase that we have in our budget, equals about a 6.9% budget increase. It really all ties back to contractual type obligations, the vast majority of which is salary, but also benefits, to some degree rent, and then internal service funds as well. So, yeah.
Probably this page here that summarizes your salaries, benefit changes to get to a total of the 1.119 million.
That's a good, exactly right. I think that's a good page to go to. It just, we have the ups and downs immediately following that, but this pulls it all together and just shows, where for the whole department, where are the increases. And you can see the salaries are about 80%, just under 80% of the amount of the 1.1 million. Benefit rate changes, internal service fund increases, a small increase on rent, and then this sort of legal services agreement that we have with ADS, but it also negatives out because we used to have 2 direct employees in our department and 2 direct employees that eventually became ADS employees that service the department, and we don't have those direct liaisons anymore. We are part of the team at ADS that sort of services departments generally. So Dave can provide more information on that if you're interested, but pretty straightforward in terms of the budget request. If you go up 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, there's a slide in there that talks about how over the last 5 years the department has lost over 500 years of experience through retirements. Yeah. So that is, I wanted to point that out because, I mentioned 6 years ago, I thought it was critical that we maintain our strength of our team and the reputation we have in the industry. And the other challenge we had was knowing we had a lot of longtime DFR employees that were on the cusp of retirement, and just trying to sort of quantify that here. We only have about 105 or 110 employees at our department. So to lose, over 500 years of experience at our department, not within the industry, but 500 years of experience at our department, is certainly a significant sea change in terms of personnel. But I think, our deputies, our directors, they've done a really good job managing those transitions. It's challenging to have succession plans, in state government sometimes, because you don't know exactly, you just can't do it in the same way you might be able to in the private sector. But even that being the case, we've really strived to hire at all levels. So hire really strong people early in their career, mid-career, later in their career, and people that are in the early part to develop them up to the middle, for people that are in the later part of their career to come in and fill a certain role that might have been vacated. So really think the department is managing that well. We have an internship program that we developed for about 4 years ago. We've had three or four interns that worked for the summer that ended up staying on either as a full-time employee or worked beyond their internship, whether after graduation for some period of time or still do, or just continued their internship on through their senior year. And they've been, it's been a nice, strengthening of our staff, because I didn't know exactly what a college age intern would be able to bring to our department, but we probably had 15 or so throughout the years, and without exception, they've been extraordinarily talented and have really contributed a lot to the projects that they've worked on. And it's been nice to have some of them start their careers with the department as well. And then we also have really been investing in professional development with our employees. So we mentioned there the 2021 employee accomplishments, over 45 different designations through different accrediting associations that our employees have received in the last year. 5 of our employees are in the process of getting a graduate degree, and we are very supportive with the graduate degree or any of the advanced degrees or undergraduate degrees, both in terms of timing, if they have flexibility around time, and to the degree that we can, supporting them financially to cover cost of books or cost of courses and the like. So we had 3 folks that finished their undergraduate degrees in 2021, 2 that completed the Vermont Certified Public Manager designation, and we have 1 that's in the process of becoming a CPA as well. So, all these retirements, but we're able to maintain, I think, that strength by layering on the levels of experience that we have, making sure we're investing in our employees, giving them the opportunities early on in their career to take responsibility and be in a position to take over when there is a retirement. So it's something I just wanted to highlight, because I know I'm sure other departments are going through it, but it's something we've had to deal with. And, there's no magic to it, but it's just something we've had to keep at our mind, the front of our mind over the last 5 years.
Commissioner, on that front, workforce and recruitment, it depends. Certain areas of government have been in better spots than others. Are you, in terms of recruitment, or carrying a higher rate of vacancies than you would like to have? How do things stand in that front? People like working for you and they stay there and want to come and work? Huh?
Well, no, they all retire.
Well, if you have a few people that have been there 35, 40 years, it doesn't take too many of them to get, up to that 500 threshold that you're.
Yeah. No, we had, one person was 46 years of that.
Wow. Wow,
So,
what an outlier.
But we should break it down by, over 40, over 30, over 20, over 10, because there's quite a few people that have been with us for 30 years that just their retirement, their retirements, they all sort of came up with each other in the department, and they all got to retirement age at the same time. So, it's been something on our radar that we had to watch and try to make sure we could, that we could solve for. And I think we've done a good job on that.
So how are you been able to fill the positions then?
Yes. So one area I would say we're particularly strong on recruitment, and our general counsel, Gavin, if he were here, but Gavin Boyles every so often has a lawyer. For the most part, they end up going into our department as a director or some other leadership job. So he's had probably, or a couple of retirements. So he's had probably 2 or 3 legal openings in the last 3 years. And the quality of candidates that he receives are just amazing. I mean, the people that we end up interviewing, any of them would be a great hire. And there's a number of people that we don't end up interviewing that are really strong too. So that's one place in particular where we've had a great deal of good applicants. Our captive insurance division, our banking division, our insurance division, they've all been able to get good candidates, I would say. But more recently, with captives, they had a single really outstanding candidate, and they didn't have anybody else apply. So if that outstanding candidate hadn't applied, they would have had to go back to the drawing board. So I would say in the last 6 months to a year, we've started to see some of that, which is unusual for us, but we're still able to make good hires. But the number of applicants that we're getting is not maybe as numerous as we had previously. The only other thing I would say on that is we've benefited from some employees that are sort of later in their career that have decided to move to Vermont, that are not looking to retire, but are looking to, not work in the private sector any longer. I can think of 2 or 3 people in the last year that we've hired that fit that mold. And that's really great to be able to get that experience to help some of our younger employees and just to bring that industry experience to the department generally, so that, we can get that right balance of regulatory and industry experience. So it's another area that we've been fortunate to take advantage of with, people moving during the pandemic and rethinking their, how they want to live their lives. And we're also open to remote work in a way that we weren't, not that we weren't in favor of remote work previously. We have a lot of examiners who are home based, but we have no problem hiring somebody that, for example, a recent hire lives in Woodstock. He's an individual that retired from a big financial firm in Boston. If he had to work in Montpelier, he probably wouldn't work for us. Just not that he doesn't like working for us, but his home is in Woodstock in the Upper Valley. But giving them the flexibility of working remotely, we really can leverage that experience and that that expertise. So I think that's another way that we've been trying to handle recruitment is through that flexibility as well, which I think more and more employees are expecting at this point. So another item that I wanted to mention, it's one of the focuses of our department that's relatively new. It's after that page that talks about retirements, but it's a focus on climate change in Vermont and the impact on consumers, and specifically at this point, the insurance industry, but you could expand that out to the banking industry as well. So just to give a high level overview, generally insurance companies property and casualty companies, I'm talking about those that would insure your home or your car, they have a pretty tough period of the year during the winter when, people may be in more car accidents because of snow. They might have roofs caving in because of snow on the roof. They might have pipes bursting because of freezing cold weather. They might have trees falling on homes or cars because of snow and the like. They have more people using wood stoves during the winter that might cause house fires. So generally in the Northeast, insurers would be focused on, what do our winter claims look like, and the rest of the year might be relatively quiet. And the thing that we were interested in looking at and trying to model out into the future is, how has our weather in Vermont changed over the past decade? And how has that impacted insurance claims? And how will it impact insurance claims into the future and impact Vermonters into the future? So no surprise, I'm sure, to the committee, but we partnered with a meteorological firm, and they did the weather analysis. We were able to get claims data from a number of our insurance companies, and they sort of partnered those up. And they did find that the biggest weather events that we've had in the last decade were not winter events, but they were these sort of acute, severe weather occurrences, a hailstorm in May and a windstorm in October, back about 4, 5, 6 years ago. So as the weather has sort of gotten warmer and wetter in Vermont, basically, it's meant that we have less snow-covered days, maybe less freezing days, less snowfall. So some of those winter claims might not be as frequent, but on the other side, it means we're seeing severe weather in the spring that comes with severe rainfall, more likely to be flooding, more likely to impact agriculture and our farm insurance sort of sector because of how they're able to plant in the spring and how that gets torn up through torrential rain. More windstorms, more hailstorms, more severe weather generally, throughout the spring, summer, and fall. So those are trends that are only going to get exacerbated over time, and our companies need to be aware of them so that they are not sort of pricing and looking at sort of the old model, that they're sort of understanding how this is going to change into the future. And particularly when it comes to flood, it's something that Vermont consumers need to be aware of, because we have very few flood policies in Vermont, and we've had, fortunately, except for some really noticeable instances, relatively limited flood occurrences happening. But with increased severe weather and rain and dramatic rainfalls into the future, we unfortunately might start to experience more of that. So that impacts Vermonters, impacts our banking industry, impacts our insurance industry, and something that we're working with them on so that they're aware of those issues, aware of those challenges, trying to mitigate against them and trying to prevent them from happening, to the degree that they can.
Let me, the news, it seems like every day there's some kind of severe weather. It's, either the West is burning or tornadoes. Yeah. I mean, the devastation, the flood, it seems like it's, now it's, the fire season is just almost year round. And so the claims are just staggering when you think about it. Vermont policies, in other words, to what extent do that overall national experience impact premiums in Vermont, or are they all sort of state by state determined?
Yeah, so that's sort of one of the things our department's on the lookout for, is we want to make sure that when the rate is filed in Vermont, that it's representative of risk here in Vermont. So you can't say, we lost X amount of millions in California, so we're going to spread that out everywhere. You have to justify the risk that's present to Vermonters and to Vermont. So that is something that's not allowed, and something we would be, working to try to ensure that the rates are adequate, that they're adequate to cover the risk in Vermont, but they're not excessive in trying to spread any of the losses or any of the income risks in other part of the country elsewhere.
I know that somewhere someone was showing, I don't know who did it, areas of the state that they would recommend you move to. And it seems like 3 or 4 counties were specifically referenced in Vermont as desirable places to move. And it was more related to obviously risk, climate, etc. So it seems like a lot more of this is going on in terms of movement in certain areas of the country. But so your climate work is kind of interesting, because the insurance risk here, particularly the coastal areas or certain prone areas, whether it be drought or whether it be fires, whether it be tornadoes, it's just the losses have got to be staggering.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, really, really significant. And there are opportunities to try to mitigate some of the risk in terms of financial risk, not in terms of impacting the climate change, by diversification and getting reinsurance contracts and the like. But even there, some of the reinsurers are not wanting to take some of this risk, and it is putting pressure on companies in certain parts of the country. And so, for example, in California, companies are saying we're not going to write business there for this particular risk anymore, and that's a real challenge that they're having. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, we don't have that going on, but we're still seeing the impact of climate in Vermont in a much, it's a much less acute way than coastal areas or the wildfire prone areas, but it's still an impact nonetheless.
Yeah, certainly. And then you got to do a lot of the work on COVID and some analysis there. So that was kind of gave you a new assignment over the last few months.
Yeah, I mean,
2 years. Well, March 13th. March 13th, 2020, we walked out of this building and we came back March 8th.
2 years.
Yeah, I think
Later.
I'm looking at the calendar because I think it was about 2 years ago that the governor called a
Yes,
handful of
March
people.
13th, Friday the 13th, we
Right,
left. Yeah.
I think it was either the 9th or it was sometime that week where the governor called a handful of us together and said, you know, can you look at this? Can you do this? And yeah, and ours, I think he opened the meeting by saying, Mike, you might wonder why I asked you to be here. So that was the start of it about 2 years ago.
So what was the answer to the question?
Well, the question was, you know, the concern at the time and still the concern today was it seemed like COVID-19 was impacting older individuals more than younger individuals in terms of severe health outcomes. And we know that we're one of the older states in the country. So how will this impact Vermont relative to what we were seeing in Italy at the time or China? And I think it set the stage for the intensity of the response at the beginning because we knew we had more vulnerabilities in terms of vulnerable Vermonters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, only look at the age of the Senate. You don't even need to respond to that. Yeah, I understand. Well, was a good job and a nice, but it was a long siege.
Thank you.
And then you got COVID.
Yeah, I did get COVID myself. I got it. I was going home for Christmas and was tested a couple of different times that week. And was at the press conference on Tuesday. I took an antigen test that day. I was negative, but I took another test the next day, and that one was positive. And I was very fortunate. I had gotten my booster just about a month before that, and it was just for me. It was. I wouldn't even have remembered being sick. I was fortunate. It just really had very limited symptoms. So it was challenging though. I know I can only imagine, you know, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands Vermonters being isolated for, 10 days, 14 days originally. It's tough to be able to, do that and manage your life and everything. But for me, fortunately, the isolation was the worst part.
Well, you can still work remotely.
Exactly right. It gives you an appreciation of people that can't do that, really, right? I mean, I was not so sick that I couldn't work, and I was able to work remotely the entire time. Other people, obviously, if they have a job where they are not salaried and they don't have that ability, then if they were too sick to do the work or had to be isolated and couldn't go to their in-person job, it's a real challenge.
Oh, yeah.
It certainly is. Well, we've kind of meandered around away from the PowerPoint here. Is there any other page you want to direct their attention to? I do have, usually many years you've got, I don't know, some changes to captive insurance or you've got a bill in for that. Anything that you've got in terms of other non-fiscal but legislation that the department has initiated?
Yes, we do have a captive bill again this year. I would say it's largely housekeeping with one exception. There is a concept of a risk transfer exchange that we think we probably could effectuate, but are looking to do it through legislation. And the idea would be to let captive insurance companies and really any investor, pension fund, insurance company, be able to make risk transfer contracts. So, for example, if they said we want to protect against some really significant event that's unlikely to occur, and we will pay. We'll pay if it happens. We want to be paid $50 million, and we're willing to pay someone $5 million for that risk. So we'll pay you $5 million. If it does happen, we get $50 million, but it's very unlikely to happen. So those are sort of contracts that would happen among very sophisticated, very large pension funds, captive insurance companies, and the like. And it would benefit Vermont through revenue as part of those transactions. So that's a concept that is in the captive bill this year that is new. The rest of our bill is again I would say pretty much housekeeping, nothing too significant. But at the same time, the captive industry itself has been having quite a significant 2 years really. They've had last year I think we had 38 new captive insurance companies. This past year it was I think it was 47 if my memory serves me correct. So 2020 was about 38, last year 47. We're off to a really strong start this year. One interesting captive we just signed was the I'm not going to be able to say it, the NCAA, the National College Athletic Association, for their officers and directors. They formed a captive and brought it to Vermont. A number of international captives, a number of really large companies. So really strong on the captive formation over the last 2 years. And that division continues to do really well. We have some information in our report about them continuing to be able to complete their examinations in a shorter period of time in a more efficient way, doing the exams under budget, which is important for our captive insurance companies that are here, because we're not always the least expensive state, but we are one of the strongest in terms of our regulatory oversight.
And what's interesting is they value the strength and integrity of that regulatory, it's worth it. At least back when we used to have the conference in Burlington, that was certainly part of that discussion. Are more captives being formed, or are we sort of just cannibalizing the ones, which is oftentimes what we do in economic development is there's something that you try to lure some entity that's located in some other state. I know that there's like Caymans and Bermuda obviously are big, but I was just wondering, in terms of the numbers you're giving, are they new? Are they locating to Vermont because of Vermont's reputation in terms of our regulatory environment and support of the captive industry?
Yeah, so for the most part, they are new. Where there's captive growth and where there's the potential for captive growth, smaller companies, most of the larger companies already have a captive, but smaller companies, companies in Europe, companies in Canada, there's not maybe a ton of opportunity north of the border, but we've had a few Canadian-based companies recently. We thought there's a big opportunity in Latin America. We were planning at the beginning of COVID, Dave Provost and his team were going to do a trade association mission in Mexico City as a starting place, and that had to be canceled. And we did it remotely a year later, but we're there at the appropriate time, anxious to look at opportunities there and in Latin America. And the other area where we get a lot of opportunity is new types of risk. So cybersecurity, for example, either they're creating a new captive for cybersecurity specifically, they might already have a captive for some other line of business, or they're adding that risk to their existing captive. So we might not get a new captive, but we have more premium being written out of that captive, which is generating more premium tax. So that's certainly been a good thing. And then the pandemic itself has caused some new captive formations. Also, people are trying to protect against pandemic-related risk. If they're a health insurance company, for example, we have our highest, the industry type that we have the most captives is the health industry. So whether they're trying to prevent against the next pandemic, or even the business interruption insurance that a lot of individual businesses unfortunately turned out that where they were not covered at the beginning of the pandemic, they've been trying to mitigate that risk through captives. So both new companies and new types of risk are giving us opportunity.
Comments or questions?
So,
Sure.
so just kind of a question that a constituent, very poor guy, wound up in a somehow entanglement with this credit union and them freezing his account. And he thinks he's going to jail. But I mean, it's such a small amount of money that this guy had. But apparently he does some online gambling, and he had a bump up in what was going into his account by a direct deposit or taken out. And then the credit union manager said, well, he's being investigated by the regulators. And he says, oh my God, I might go to jail. And I said, how much money was it? He goes, oh, it's just a few dollars. Well, who knows if that's really true or not. But are there guidelines that would trigger some kind of a bump like that would refer him to the investigators who investigate credit unions, whoever the regulators? I mean, is that kind of thing, it's not like big money laundering.
Right. No, exactly right. I mean, I do think, I think it'd be unlikely.
Commissioner, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're free. You would be, feel free to have your constituent reach out to me or to our department, certainly. Oftentimes, we could put all the acronyms for all the different regulatory agencies of the federal government and the state government that work together. And for a consumer to navigate that is probably next to impossible. But our staff has familiarity and, more importantly, has relationships with all of those places, so they can often get information or get an answer. So I definitely recommend that. I would say it's probably unusual for the credit union to refer it to someone that would investigate, which would probably be state or federal prosecutors. Though, it may not be unlikely for them to prevent a deposit or prevent or even freeze an account if there was a lot of activity. Partly it's to protect the bank. They need to know your customer laws, and they need to know where money's coming from. Partly to protect the customer, since there's so much cybersecurity and financial scams that are so prevalent, unfortunately. But I would say that's likely, potentially, but not necessarily referring it to some higher law enforcement authority. But yeah, feel free to have them contact us.
I mean, the manager of the credit union says, I can't talk to you about this anymore. I'm forbidden talking to you about this anymore. I can't talk to you. So anyway, all right, that's good. Thank you.
Well, the individual, the client could seek.
Oh, he wasn't saying that to me. He was saying that to his customer.
To the customer.
To his member of his credit union. Yeah, not to me.
Do you have a question, Senator Starr?
No, Michael's doing well.
Are there certain things that redline if you have investments? I had a strange thing where actually I can write checks off of my son's account, but they said because I was in public office or something, I had to have documentation where the money came from in his account. Is that common? You know what that is? And I was redlined, so I couldn't, it was like I couldn't use, it was almost, they were concerned that I would be using his account for, I don't know, for questionable purposes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like to somehow funneling it, privately to yourself or something. I think it's probably a policy of the bank that, depending on what profession you are, they may have some additional requirements.
Because I was in public office, because I was in political office.
Yeah.
So are there special rules around us then? I guess is what I'm saying.
My guess is that they're bank specific. I can't think of any certainly no state regulatory requirements or state laws that I can think of. But it may be a business practice of the bank, or there may be a federal law that I'm unfamiliar with.
Oh, well, I was redlined anyway, or whatever it was.
That I had a similar issue come up with open land that my husband and I owned, and they said they couldn't insure it because I was a politician. Really.
And because we're compensated so highly too. I mean, we have a lot of,
Weird.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Land that you own or buildings?
Open land.
Open land, they couldn't
Insure if it was a politician. So, I mean, you'd think they'd be wanting to insure anything they can get their hands on.
I don't know. Ever heard of that one, Commissioner?
It is actually ringing a bell. I don't, not that specific instance, but on the insurance side, I remember having a conversation with our deputy about another situation where they were non-renewed, and part of the reason they were non-renewed is because they were a state representative, and it was baffling to me. I don't know what the reason for that is, other than there's nothing we're saying, or nothing that is in law that's saying that needs to be the case. I don't know what their concern was.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any other questions or situations that we want to?
So, no,
It's because we're paid so handsomely, I guess, that they're concerned that we have a lot of money to under. Yeah, Senator Westman.
So I'm not sure that you're the right person to ask, but because you regulate health insurance, what role will your department have with the squabble that's going on with the medical center and the large health provider, and them not paying them because they're not network? Will your department have a role there?
So we have an informal role, I would say, Senator Westman. Our department, Agency of Human Services, Green Mountain Care Board, none of us have direct regulatory authority over United Healthcare because the plans that they are issuing are federally covered ERISA plans. We just don't have jurisdiction. There's about 1,800 Vermonters impacted, about 800 upstate New Yorkers that are impacted. There are about 15,000 Vermonters that have Medicare supplement plans that are not impacted, but there are a lot of Vermonters that are familiar with United Healthcare. So when they hear that, they get worried. And we are concerned about that because they don't obviously need to be worried, but they're getting caught up in it. We're even more worried, obviously, about the 2,600 or so that are impacted here because of this negotiation that's going on between UVM and UHC, United Healthcare. Even though we don't have a formal regulatory role, we have been engaged with both of the parties. We've been engaged with each other, with the federal delegation, trying to understand what the roadblocks are to reaching an agreement. We're encouraging the parties to continue to negotiate and get to an agreement. And if they cannot get to an agreement, they should extend the contract beyond April 1st, because 30 days is not sufficient notice for these individuals and their employers to get alternative health insurance. So we are actively playing that role. It's an informal role. There's no direct regulatory oversight, but United Healthcare is an enormous company. They're in the top 10 of the Forbes 500 in terms of the largest revenue making companies in the world. They're in the same category as Apple and Walmart. 50 million customers, 300,000 employees. They're not paying attention to Vermont, and we're trying to do everything we can to get someone to understand the situation is really causing a great deal of anxiety to these Vermonters that are impacted, and to try to end the negotiation tactics and try to get something done.
So because it's federally regulated, we have constituents that are contacting us that are afraid, where should we send them?
Still send them to us. Our website, dfr.vermont.gov, it has an email for consumers and a consumer hotline. They can contact us because we can let them know, first of all, whether or not they're impacted. And if they are impacted and a contract does not come in place, they're going to want to understand their options and the impact of getting care at UVM Medical or UVM Health Network versus one of the other specialists or hospitals. So please do continue to send them to us. That's something we're happy to handle.
I have 3 or 4 emails from people about that, and I haven't known where to go.
Yeah, please send them to us. So you send them to me, I'll forward them to our consumer services director.
Thank you.
Other questions, Senator Baruth or Senator Sears? No? Okay.
No, I just want to thank you and your team for all the work during the COVID crisis. It was extremely helpful to have the information, and you gave it in such a way that I think most people respected. And I don't, I too wonder how you got that job. But I just want to thank you for that, because particularly during the first 6 months when 12 months, I should say, before vaccines became widely available, you know, you were the source of information about trends and et cetera. And it was really, you know, beyond what one would expect from the director of financial regulation, frankly.
Okay, other comments or, did we lose the commissioner?
No.
Oh,
It looks like he might have dropped out.
I think
inadvertently.
I think he probably heard my compliment and
I
fell
think he
off
was
the
probably,
chair. And
I said I better log off while, I'm on a high note here. Any other comments, or otherwise we can, from Emily or David, any other comments? Otherwise,
No.
we've certainly gone way beyond the budget. We appreciate your, the commissioner's back. Must be as we keep saying, everyone's stable. So,
Sorry about that. I'm not in my normal location, so I was on my iPad and my iPad just died. So sorry, Senator Sears. Thank you very much for those nice words, though.
well, you're welcome. I was afraid you fell off the chair. And
yeah, I think we probably should let you leave on a high note then, unless there are any other questions. Okay, well, we do want to all thank you again for your work and your service. And, committee, with this, we've finished our testimony for today, and I'm going to adjourn the